10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Champions! Wrexham are promoted. They have their storybook ending.
You can walk through the fire. You can walk through the fire. When it's down to the wire. You can walk through the fire.
Howdy, y'all. Welcome to the Wrexham Texan. My name is Jake Green. Thank y'all for joining me today. Today is going to be a little bit longer of an episode. It's the episode review for season 3, episode 3, which I have now forgot what the dadgum name of the episode is. I was literally just rewatching it to prepare this, and I forgot. Oh no, it's called Knots Again. Yeah, it's called Knots Again. I knew that. I knew that because I interviewed Luke Middup again for the Knots section of this episode. Our interview lasted about 40 minutes, so this the rest of the analysis of this episode is going to be much shorter than normal. I honestly didn't think it was that great of an episode. I thought it was very all over the place. We seemed to bounce from one thing to another a lot during this episode, and they crammed a lot of things in, which just kind of made me feel a little lost and hurried to get through things, which I don't know. It wasn't my favorite. We started off with the women's squad getting promoted last season and being in a much, much tougher league. And I found it funny that Rob and Ryan were annoyed that the season prior they couldn't pay the players in an amateur league. There's very good reasons for that. Like if you're in an amateur league where you don't pay the players, and then one team is able to start paying the players, then that team's going to destroy everybody. And if they allow all the teams to pay the players, well, then the teams that have very little money will just get walloped and left by the wayside. So I actually don't, for amateur football, I don't really mind that being a rule. Then we cut to Andy's Man Club, which I just think is about the funniest name for a mental health club there is. I loved it. And we hear about Dan Rowe's story about his son almost dying, and he didn't think there was anything he could do. And that whole thing was brutal. You really, really thought that his son died until like 4 minutes go by and we finally see his son alive and well and happy and playing football. And that was a big twist. I really thought his son died, which the editing there was fantastic. They did a great job of the suspense. Yeah, that was heartbreaking. You're sitting there for like 4 minutes going, I can't believe that cute little kid died just after he was born. That was terrible. So kudos to the editing team for evoking those emotions from me. Let's see. Yeah, then during that section, Rob kind of mentions that audiences, like when it's a sport or a show or a movie or anything that requires a ton of preparation, but that the audience for that it only gets to see the main event. You're not going to see all the thousands and thousands of hours that go into training, all the time watching game film, interacting with your teammates, trying to build camaraderie, all the anxiety and the stress that goes with it. You're not going to see any of that. You're just going to see them play on Saturdays. So it, I like that. I think everybody should have an avenue to deal with their stress and their anxiety. And I think the less stress and anxiety you have in your life, the longer you're going to live and the happier you're going to live. So, I have very specific ways of dealing with mine. And everybody needs to find that. So, I like that there's a group out there, Andy's Man Club. It's fantastic. I'm going to spend exactly 5 seconds on the Stockport game. We lost 5-0. It was terrible. Worst game of the season. I hated it, and that's it. Done. Moving on. Mia Roberts gets released this episode. That was unexpected. I don't have time to. A few years ago, I had to whittle down what sports teams I followed devoutly. Okay, I used to follow Texas Rangers baseball, Dallas Cowboys football, Texas A&M football, Texas A&M basketball, Dallas Stars hockey, U.S. men's national team soccer, and then the Dallas Burn soccer, which is MLS. And I'm sure there was a couple of North Carolina basketball, Miami football, Miami Hurricanes, because my granddad played for them and coached there. So years ago, I had to whittle it down, and I whittled it down to U.S. men's national team soccer, Texas A&M football, Texas A&M basketball. Okay. That was it. That was like, I'll watch the others when they get to the playoffs, and I'll be super excited about it. Like I watched the Rangers win the World Series last year. But I don't get to sit down and watch every single game because I have so much going on in my adult life. And so I added Wrexham, but there's just no possible way that I can add two football teams. The women's, like I can't just devoutly follow the women's team as well. So I don't know as much about them. Had no idea Mia Roberts got released before the season. She seemed like a good player. I have no idea though, because I don't watch enough of their team play. But we find out that the women are in third place at this moment, and then we go to Okonkwo, the signing of Okonkwo, which was huge, which Luke and I talk about in the interview for a little while about the possibility of his return, signing with us full time. But yeah, he knew that he wanted to be a professional goalkeeper at the age of 14, which I feel like might be a little late for compared to some other football players. He wasn't positive about coming to Wrexham until he spoke to Phil Parkinson, which I said it a million times on this show. Phil knows how to get the right players and has the right temperament to get the right players for what we need. So it is not surprising at all that he made his decision after talking to Parky. Then they ask Mark Howard on camera, does he have what ifs from the Stockport game? This is where I think they did a little bit of editing trickery, because I think when they asked him that, his immediate response was no. But they edited it to look like he was sad and depressed, and there was something unsaid. I'm not positive that that's actually what happened in the room. I think that he immediately said, no, I couldn't have saved most of those goals anyway at the Stockport game. So that's some editing magic. I'm okay with it if it is telling the truth. I'm not okay with it if it's trying to get you to think that he actually is in pain when he's actually not. So hard to tell. I would want to see the raw footage from that interview to see if that's what they did, but it is what it is. Yeah. That was pretty much it for today. For this episode, I'll show my interview with Luke Middup here in just a second, and then I'll come back at the end and give my score for the whole episode. All right. Mr. Luke Middup, welcome back to the show, man.
Yeah, like a bad penny, I have returned.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. We were just talking about this right before we went on air, but the title of the episode is Knots Again, and you don't
You don't actually see that much of the game. No.
Yeah, it's like the last 5 minutes of the whole episode is about knots, and they titled the entire thing after it. So that was a little bit of a misdirect. But man, watching it back, I forgot how intense the game was until that 74th minute.
Yeah.
Did what did you think watching it back?
I have to say, watching like the whole first half of this season, this series is like really depressing because you see knots at third, fourth, fifth, and all of a sudden it gets to like the next episode 4, and they have to do a little like 5-minute insert to explain why we're not there anymore because it's all falling apart.
It's all falling apart. Yeah, this first game, y'all still had Luke Williams. Things were still looking really good. I can't remember what month did we play, y'all? What
October.
It
was
October.
I just watched the episode back now, so I can tell you it was October the 28th.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, things were looking good for both our squads, and then it took a turn for y'all. But
then you kind of pulled away. So yeah, it was like I said, it's been interesting. It's been interesting and depressing to watch the first few episodes of this season because it's like we're there. Oh, we get to episode 4, we're not there anymore.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like as a Wrexham supporter, I felt annoyed that y'all kept sliding down the ladder. It would have been really cool to keep the rivalry going for another season. Maybe y'all be up there with us next year.
We'll see.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, if you want to, I can talk about what's been happening in the close season so far. And
let's talk about that right after this. What was like when you watched the episode? Did you like relive this game? Like, do you remember it specifically watching it?
I remember it mostly because it was the first time I was on the Wrexham Texan. So
there we go.
So yeah, I remember the challenge between Mullen and Jody Jones. That even watching it back, Mullen should definitely have been sent off. I think what was interesting about watching it in an episode of Welcome to Wrexham was seeing the stuff with Steve Parkin and Phil Parkinson, the manager and the coach.
Yeah.
Beforehand, because like I find it's not the first time a documentary has done this, but it's pretty rare that you get a coach mic'd up.
No kidding.
During halftime and stuff. So, I mean, there is an infamous UK documentary, which I don't think ever made it over to the States, but you should certainly look it up on Amazon if you're ever interested, which was just a bunch of film students following around Leyton Orient, and they had their squad like mic'd up. And the reason it's infamous is because the club almost goes bankrupt during the course of the documentary.
Yeah.
And also it's the coaches. It's a bit like a real life version of Ted Lasso because it's the coach's first job as a head coach and the club is falling apart around him. And you kind of see him having to react to all this terrible stuff that's going on. It's like all the players get sold out from under him. And he just like there is a famous, you can look it up on YouTube if you look up John Sitton, Sitton rant where he just completely loses it. Not in the way that Phil Parkinson will swear a lot. I mean, this guy just completely unspools at halftime during the game. And so for a long time, because John Sitton never got another job in football again. I remember reading a magazine article of he basically had to become a cab driver. So for a long time, clubs were really reluctant to engage in that kind of project.
Interesting.
Is
this the rant right here? The top one?
Yeah, that
Okay.
one.
On you go, Wieldy. Tick. Make an angle for him. Now fucking pull your socks up, because they're going to beat us if we go out the second half like that. That is a fucking typical performance that we've had too often here.
Yeah, so that's just Parky level swearing. But what
yeah, he's not happy. That was definitely Phil Parkey-esque.
Yeah, believe me, if you want to watch that clip to the end, it gets so much worse.
Yes. Okay.
So yeah, up until the Sunderland Till I Die Netflix documentary, which obviously influenced Rob McElhenney, clubs have been really reluctant to let cameras into dressing rooms at halftime. Partially because of the amount of swearing, but also because it really did wreck John Sitton's career. The poor guy has been a meme for like 30 years, even before memes were a thing. So yeah, I always think one of the really cool parts of Welcome to Wrexham is that they have been that Phil Parkinson and Steve Parkin, the coach and the assistant coach, have been brave enough to let themselves be mic'd up. And I thought watching that against Notch was really interesting because I think it communicated the level of respect that Phil Parkinson had for Luke Williams and that team. And I also think that, particularly the after the game bit was really interesting because you could tell how pleased they were to have come through that game and to have won.
Yeah.
I mean, like I say, I think that game, almost in hindsight, kind of marks the point at which our good start to the season kind of started to slip. Okay. I mean, we were in the playoffs up until sort of late January, but I think that looking back on it, that game was probably the game that highlighted some of the structural weaknesses that were going to go on and plague.
They did mention, because one of the strategies for Wrexham was to your attackers weren't so good when they didn't have the ball. According to Parkey. Yeah, and so I think it was to swarm them every single time they got the ball.
Yeah, I think that was very much sort of my memory of the game as well. So I think teams have kind of figured out how to play us. I think given what we seem to be looking to do in the transfer market over the summer, I wouldn't expect us to be playing a completely different brand of football next season. But I think we're gonna tweak it slightly just to give ourselves a few more options. It looks like they want to make the team physically bigger, physically larger on the whole, sort of taller and a bit more muscular and a bit more So yeah, I mean, how have you been dealing with the no live football, Jay?
The first 3 weeks I didn't know really what to do with myself, but then life's just busy, so it moves on. I'll be glad to have it back later in the year, but it's been I got to watch the U.S. men's team get rocked yesterday, so that was a blast. Just watching him get crushed by Colombia 5-1. That was so much fun to watch. But yeah, I just always have so much stuff going on that I never I miss things for just a few minutes, and then I'm off to the next thing. So yeah, what about you? What have you been up to?
I'm actually, because I'm a university lecturer. That's what I do. That's what I do for my day job. I've also been finishing off a book that I've been working on for several years. I got that off. I got that off to the editor on Friday.
Dude,
so hopefully
congrats.
hopefully it comes back with minimal changes. So this week I'm sort of making sure that my MLit and PhD students are on the right track over the summer. But then next week I'm going to do something I've always wanted to do. Yeah. And this is where it comes back to football, because on June 14th the European Championships starts. So a week yesterday, and I've got a load of annual leave, load of paid vacation saved up. So I'm taking the whole month off, and I'm going to try to watch every single minute of every single game.
Holy crap!
I've always wanted to do that, and I've never had the time. I've never had the time to do it. So that's going to be my mission for the summer, actually.
Oh my gosh, are you gonna be tweeting out about it? What are you?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say actually, probably at the end of the podcast, but now you've asked, I'm going to try and do a 20-minute, 30-minute pod each day.
Love
sort
it.
of a summary, and you're more than welcome to come on if you want to watch any of the Euros, Jake. You're more than welcome.
I'd love to watch some of the Euros. So yeah, I might hit you up when I've decided, where the time is that I can watch a game. Wow, that is an endeavor, man. That is very impressive. That's I've
always wanted to try and do it, but I've never had the time to do it. And I got so much paid vacation stored up because I haven't taken it in years. So I just thought, right, I am booking myself a solid month. I'm getting the book done, and then I'm going to treat myself.
Oh, heck yeah. Huge fan of that.
Yeah.
I always take 4 days off to watch the beginning of March, the first 4 days of March Madness over here, but I would love to take the entire month off to watch the whole tournament.
Yeah.
Same with the World Cup. Yeah, the World Cup would be fun. I would love, if it wasn't going to be so expensive at the World Cup here in a couple of years, I would go to so many games, but those games are going to be so pricey.
Yeah.
I'm not looking forward to that aspect of it. Well, yeah, tell us what's been going on with Knots since the season ended.
Well, I mean, obviously we finished 14th in the end, which is not great. I mean, had you offered that to me before the season started, first season back in the EFL, I would have been disappointed, but I would have taken it. What made it really disappointing was that we had such a good start to the season and we were hanging in the playoffs, as late as January, February, and then it all just fell apart. We went from the end of, really from Christmas, but certainly from end of January through February, we went on an appalling run of form.
Yeah,
we didn't win for like 7 or 8 games straight. And yeah, obviously we had the disruption. I think we spoke about this last time I was on the pod, of Luke Williams leaving, Stuart Maynard coming in. Yeah. And I think that transition was harder than a lot of people expected it to be. Obviously, Stuart Maynard is coming from Wealdstone, so he was coming from a part-time coach to a full-time coach, which had to have been, he hasn't really spoken about it, but that had to have been a big sort of upturn in his life. Obviously, he's moving to a different part of the country mid-season.
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't think he helped himself a great deal, because I actually stopped listening to his interviews at the end of matches, because I actually discovered something that I think I hate more than you hate flopping, which is, I understand that you don't want to throw individual players under the bus, but there were so many times during that run where he would just don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining. Don't tell me we played better than we actually did.
Right.
Or don't tell me that we were unlucky when we clearly weren't.
He wasn't owning up to the
sort of owning up to where you are, and also just sort of, some of the answers he gave to perfectly legitimate questions that the guys on local radio, our equivalent to Mark Griffiths was asking. They were asking him perfectly reasonable questions, and he was just getting really snitty and snippy. And it was just, I think one of the things Stuart Maynard needs to do over the summer is get himself some media training.
There we go.
Because he's not in longer form interviews, or when he's sat down ahead of matches, I think he comes across quite well. But in that immediate post-game interview, clearly he's, the adrenaline is still pumping from the match, and I don't think he's particularly good at controlling that and sort of giving sort of, like I say, I stopped listening to the post-match interviews because they were really annoying me, because like I say, don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining.
Yeah, I think the only way you can get away, like as a coach or even a player, get away with being terrible in the media is if you just nonstop win. If you just win all the time, then you can say whatever you want and act however you want, pretty much. But yeah, if you're not winning, you should definitely get some media training and learn how to interact with the full stats of the game.
Because like this is the thing, the guys on Radio Nottingham were not asking him unreasonable questions.
Mhm.
They weren't being sort of because like. People would say the same thing about Ian Birchnell, but I always gave Ian Birchnell a pass because for whatever reason he and the guy doing the commentary clearly didn't get on with each other or weren't on the same wavelength. So sometimes you would get a snitty response to a slightly snitty question. So it has to go both ways. But I actually thought the guys on Radio Nottingham were doing a good job of actually not, of trying to keep things on a calm and sort of even keel. So I think Stuart Maynard could do with getting a bit of media training. I don't think he comes across particularly well in that sort of post-match context.
Mm-hmm.
I think we did a lot of chopping and changing before he found his settled first 11. And the annoying thing about that was it was pretty much the first 11 he'd sort of started with. So we just came back full circle. It wasn't a good end to the season. The one thing I'd say sort of in compensation to that is the owners have backed Stuart Maynard to the hilt. He's the guy they want in charge.
Yeah.
And the owners have a really deep well of goodwill with the fans because, when they took over, we'd just been relegated into the National League and like literally they took over on a Friday as we would have been in courts on a Monday to apply for the British version of like Chapter 11 bankruptcy.
Jeez.
So like the club was literally on the verge of going into, the club was literally on the verge of dying.
Yeah.
So the owners have enormous goodwill from the fans.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that basically buys Stuart Maynard a bit of goodwill by proxy.
Yeah.
If you see what I mean. The owners as well. The other thing I should say, which is really exciting, the owners are putting a lot of money into redeveloping not redeveloping, but updating the ground.
Okay.
And so we're going to have like a Premier League standard pitch.
There we go.
They want to bid to play under 21s, under 18s internationals. And the other thing they're doing, which I'm really excited about, is they're building out fan zone behind the ground. So so Nottingham is not like Wrexham. Nottingham's like the 10th biggest city in England. It's got about 350,000 people in it. So it's a reasonably big city. And Notts have been at that ground at Meadow Lane since 1910. And
Lord.
Yeah. And the sort of the way the city has evolved around it has changed changed a lot over that time.
Yeah.
So it's right by the River Trent. So it's one of England's bigger rivers. So you've got us on one side of the Trent and then Nottingham Forest, the Premier League club, almost exactly opposite us.
Okay.
On the other side of the river. And that part of town had always been quite industrial. You had a lot of warehouses, a lot of factories, because like the river itself was used as a means of transport, and the railway network was sort of built up to parallel the course of the river to some extent. So like Nottingham in the 19th century, early 20th century was a big producer of textiles. It was the home of Raleigh, the world's biggest producer of bikes. And sort of Meadow Lane was right in the sort of industrial heart of Nottingham. And that was a sensible place to put a football ground there because people Yeah, because people would walk from work to the match.
Yeah.
But as the city's kind of developed, that part of town is more run down than it used to be. It's sort of ex-industrial.
Gotcha.
And one of the, because I used to be involved with I wouldn't say I was the equivalent of Carrie, because there wasn't really an equivalent of Carrie, but I was part of the Disabled Supporters Association at Knots.
Gotcha.
Which was like a group within the wider supporters club. And every couple of years, the club would do a survey about what could we do to improve the match going experience. And the answer was always, there's nothing to do at the ground beyond going to see the game. So what people would do is they would come into the city, they'd park up, they'd get something to eat or something to drink in town, and then you'd walk or get the bus or get the tram up to the match, and then you just leave. And so what the club have done is they bought one of the old industrial warehouses behind the ground, ripped everything out, and are going to turn it into like a massive bar, restaurant, concert venue.
That's the way to do it. That's awesome. Yeah, you create a little community area. That's gonna be great.
Exactly. And it's going to be something that so people won't turn up at 10 to 3 on a Saturday and leave at 5:15 on a Saturday. And
Right.
what's really important about it is the club I've been talking about this for years, decades. It's taken this ownership to actually drive it through and you see this in Welcome to Wrexham, the complexities of the UK planning system.
Yes,
it's taken this group of owners to actually have the cash and the will and the plan to actually get it done. So I think that says really good things, not necessarily about where the team is, but where the club is.
Yeah, for sure.
Long term, and it does fit into what's going on in Nottingham more generally, because that part of town is now being like redeveloped. Every time I go home, it's kind of more of those warehouses are being turned into bougie flats.
There we go.
Yeah, it's all Riverside, obviously.
Yeah.
The whole part of town is changing at quite a rate. But I'm really glad the club has gotten into that process and is using that to help make the match day experience better.
Oh, so much more fun. And then you don't even have to have a ticket to the game to go hang out, in that area,
Yeah, and so they've put in something in the region of like £2 million to redo the pitch and to build this new venue.
Right.
And also like they're just making the ground, because the ground was redeveloped in the early 90s. That was when it was converted into being an all-seater venue. But it's really not had a massive amount done to it since then. And so sort of going in the mid-noughties, it was quite it wasn't as bad as Wrexham with the old cop, but like, the toilets weren't, the bathrooms weren't any good. Yeah. The food you could get in the ground was pretty poor. The queues were awful. So like they've ripped out a load of the concessions and the concession stands and redone that and signed like different contracts with different catering firms. So you actually want to buy stuff in the ground again. And I was so pleased when I went last season, because this was my absolute white whale when I was doing the disabled fan stuff, was they finally redone the disabled toilets, so they actually work.
Well, that's helpful.
Yeah, it is. So I mean, I think you've got to kind of make a distinction between where the team is and maybe where the club is. Yeah, maybe where the club is going longer term.
Yeah, I think planning longer term is great, and like setting all that stuff up for. I don't think y'all are going to be relegated again anytime soon. So planning for all that, and making the supporters happy and more enthusiastic to come to the grounds and come to the area is a great thing.
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, it's going to drive revenue for the club, because people are going to want to stay. People are going to want to come earlier and stay later, and that was always the big problem. There's nothing to do that end of town. So, like I say, you go to a pub in the city centre, or you go and get something to eat in the city centre, and then you get the bus or the tram up to the game, and then you do the same afterwards, because there's just nothing around there. I mean, there are a couple of nice pubs, but they get full like by noon on a match day. Right. So we do have the NAV, which is the Trent Navigation Inn, the NAV, which is our version of the Turf.
Okay, cool.
Which is cool.
Nice.
Best thing about the NAV is a couple of the old like you see this in Welcome to Wrexham as well. The old players tend to turn up from time to time. My favorite one was a guy called Charlie Palmer. Charlie Palmer is the last Notts player to score a goal against Nottingham Forest in a league derby.
There we go.
In 1994. And he manages like a postal depot, like an Amazon type depot now. And he'll come to the NAV every so often. And I have never once seen him buy a drink.
That makes sense.
And
it's drinks for free.
Yeah, it's like when you're in there, it's like the bit with Norm from Cheers, like And obviously you've got like the famous photo that was in the local press of him wheeling away after he scored, and there's a big blown up version of it behind the bar. Behind the bar as well.
Yeah, if I was him, I would totally go back to those bars. Yeah, you don't want to pay for your own pints. That's crazy.
No, but like I said, I've never once seen him pay for a drink.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
How's before we wrap up, how's y'all's off season going? Have y'all cut anybody?
Pretty slowly at the moment. We've only signed the one player, Matty Platt, who's a centre half from Bradford. Sort of 6'3", big physical specimen. Exactly what we need in defence. Okay. Because I think one of the things that Stuart Maynard identified was, for all the technical skill Notts have got, we sometimes, too often, we lost the physical battle of a game. So he's like, if you look at him on FootMob, he won like most tackles of any player last season. He won like the 5th most headers of any player last season. I think the big problem I can see is his passing stats are not good at all. And so I don't know where that means he fits in how we want to play. I think as like for the last 2 close seasons, a lot's gonna depend on whether we keep Macaulay Langstaff for another season. Yeah, which I think is going to be difficult. And whether we keep Jody Jones. Yeah. I think both of those are going to generate some interest. There was an interview that Macaulay Langstaff gave to the local TV station a few weeks ago, basically saying that I'm not looking to move. I'm not trying, I'm not looking to leave. But obviously, if a great offer came in for me and my family, I'd have to consider it. But I'm happy at Notts. I'm not trying to leave. I don't particularly want to leave. Yeah. So it depends whether any offers. It depends whether any offers come in, but I mean, the good thing there is we've got him under a long contract. So if anybody wants him, they're going to have to pay, right? Which is helpful. Yeah. So basically, I would say if your starting offer is under £1 million, given that that's what Jamie Vardy went for from Fleetwood, and Langstaff's stats are comparable to that. Yeah, I wouldn't say we'd be entertaining offers below that. I mean, the other thing that was really surprising was the number of players we released. So we got rid of Aidan Baldwin. We got rid who played most of our games last season. Yeah, we got rid of John Bostock. Which was really ruthless. Yeah, seriously. Because he was absolutely vital in getting us up out of the National League. You know, I'm sure people who watch Welcome to Wrexham remember that free kick.
Yep.
That's John
Everyone
Bostock.
remembers that free daggum kick.
And like that caused a bit of controversy. I can see, I wouldn't have done it. I would have offered him another year, but I can see why the club had done it, because he did look really tired towards the end of the season. And this is a guy who is 34 years old and who's been playing professional men's football since the age of 16.
Right.
And has picked up, you know, all kinds of injuries in that time. I would have kept him. I would have said, if it was me, I would have taken him aside and said, look, you're not playing 38 games. We're not going to do what we did this season again. You're not going to play 38 games. But I still think there is useful. We're going to bring in more midfield cover, but I still think there is useful.
Yeah, it's like Stephen Fletcher for us
in the squad. Yeah,
because I don't think Stephen Fletcher is going to play all of every single game ever again. But he comes in, he's our super sub, you know. So
yeah,
I think there'd be a good spot for him for that. But,
and I mean the other one that really hurt was getting rid of Jim O'Brien, which which sucked, because he was the last player that had come down with us to the National League. He'd been there all the way through, getting back up. Again, I would have kept him, but that's probably more to do with sentiment than anything else, and probably a good reason why fans don't get to make these calls. I think his sort of playing career has pretty much come to its end. He's gonna move into coaching. He's already coaching in the academy at Sheffield United. I would love to see him back at Notts one day in some capacity, because the guy really was a Notts legend. I don't think that is too strong a word. I mean, the guy has a magpie tattooed on the inside of his thigh. And like he gave a really sort of moving like Facebook post when the news was announced, that basically when he came to Notts, he'd fallen out of love with football. He wasn't sure he was going to keep playing. But he sort of found a club where the fans had sort of taken him to their hearts, and he described himself as a Notts fan, and I believe that. And
nice.
Yeah, so I hope he comes back to the club in some capacity one day. Yeah. But I mean, the one thing is, because we have released so many players, we are going to need to crack on and sign some new ones.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have, if I were not, so I would have taken a look at Aaron Hayden. I would have taken a look at Ben Tozer. I would still take a look at Luke Young, because I think he would fit. He would fit the way we play like a glove.
Yeah, his fundamentals are friggin' solid. He is really good at maintaining possession and passing. Like his
we are gonna need cover in midfield. I mean, I think that the two players that were kind of outstanding in the second half of the season for us were Scott Robertson, who we signed off Fleetwood, who was excellent, and Alassana Jatta, who I think we talked about briefly.
We did, we talked about him.
He came. It took him a while. It took him a while because the Danish season had already finished by the time he signed for us. So he had to do quite a bit of training to get up to match fitness. He hadn't been playing for a while, but his scoring record once he started playing was excellent. And he gives us something we haven't had, which is a real physical presence up front. Yeah, so awesome. If we need to, we can just play the ball, 20, 30 yards. We can just chip balls over the top of midfield, which we really couldn't do before, because we didn't have the physical presence to sort of head the ball on or hold the ball up. Yeah. And he does that really well. But he's got really good touch as well. He can control the ball well. Like I said before, he's an international teammate of Jacob Mendy. They're both playing for the Gambia. So yeah, I'd be really interested to see how he gets on with a full preseason under his belt.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that develops. Yeah, and I think Aaron Hayden already signed with another squad.
Yeah, Carlisle, I think.
Yeah.
And Tozer went to Forest Green, which that is harsh, man. Okay. There must have been other League Two clubs interested in it.
There had to have been, but I think Luke Young's still available.
He is still,
I thought he's the most consistent of the bunch. I thought.
Yeah. I mean, Aaron Hayden will be great for Carlisle if he can stay fit, which is a big.
That's the key. That's why we let him go. He can't stay fit.
So I mean, have Wrexham signed anybody yet? I don't think you have.
Not that I'm aware of.
No. Right so Arthur Okonkwo has been released by Arsenal, which I have to say I was very surprised about.
I was surprised they released him for sure. I don't think he's coming back.
I think it would be difficult. I think there'll be a lot of teams in for him.
100%. That dude's so talented.
And you always have an advantage with a player that's played there before.
It's true. It's true. We do have the advantage, but it's I just from how he was talking in his last interview that I watched, I don't think he's made up his mind where he's going, but I don't think he's going to.
I mean, this is the thing. He's not going to be short. He's not going to be short of options.
Yeah,
and I can well imagine if you're a Blackpool, if you're a Cardiff City, if you're that kind of you're in the Championship, but you're not. You're sort of that mid-table, lower-end Championship club. That would be the kind of club I think that would be looking at him because he's not going to. He's got all the talent in the world. He's not going to cost a fortune, and he's relatively young. So if he does well for you, there's good resale value there.
Heck yeah. Well, Luke, I think we should wrap it up. That's good with you.
It was. Also, I know you don't want to get ahead of it, but I think episode 4 should have had a content warning because they can't just show Luke. They can't just cut to Luke Williams. Like that. I need to get emotionally prepared for that.
Maybe it was our goal to make Knots.
I was extremely triggered by that.
Fair enough. Well, Luke, right, I appreciate you coming on, man. This has been great. I'll hit you up about the Euros. That'd be fun.
Once I get the podcast set up, I'll drop you a line.
Sounds good. Good. All right, Luke Middup. Tell them where to find you on Twitter.
So they can find me at Luke Middup on Twitter. They can find me under the same handle on Blue Sky. And I'm doing 2 podcasts at the moment. Yeah. Other than this, so I'm doing a podcast called Woolshift Dust, which is a sci-fi themed podcast. So the next thing we're doing is looking at the novels and the various adaptations of that.
There we go.
With my co-host Alicia Brenner, and I'm also doing a British politics podcast with 2 friends from college. That's called It Could Be Said, and we're doing like a couple of episodes a week because it's election. I don't know if you know, but it's election time here, so we've got 6 weeks of total nuttiness.
There we go.
So that's where people can find me.
All right, and I'll put all that in the summary below. Yeah. All right, Luke. Thanks, I appreciate you coming on, man. We'll see you next time.
Talking to you.
You too. All right, that was Mr. Luke Middup. Love that dude. I love bringing him on the show. Always enjoy listening to his side of things over in Notts County. And man, he just has so much football knowledge and so much. Sorry, I'm a little bit sick still. So much football knowledge and so much insight and thoughts and ideas around everything Notts and a lot of things football. So it's really enjoyable talking to him. That'll do it for today, y'all. This episode, Notts again, I would give, I don't know, the Notts games. The Notts game made it more interesting, although it just kind of blew right through it. It was just a few minutes. I don't know, y'all. I think this episode was a C+. C+ for this one. I just didn't think it was that amazing. So that's my opinion. Still enjoyed it. It wasn't my favorite. It was my favorite. So, well, that'll do it for this week, y'all. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week on the Wrexham Texan.
Search my soul with all your heart, you're gonna see it. You're gonna see it. And if you knock my soul with all your strength, you're gonna find it. You're gonna find it.